is diversity and inclusion in children storytelling. It's a big question. It's something that everybody is keen to know. That is, I'm talking about people that are reading children's literature or those that are writing for children. A book that really got to me. Okay, I should. Okay, that's fine. So a book that got to me way back was Lupita Nyong'o's book, Suwe. Suwe, it's a book that focuses on a Black character. And right from the start to the finish of the book, you would agree with me that she's able to bring home that truth that you cannot be judged by your skin color. And there's always that need for you to appreciate your skin color too. So, and these are part of the things that diversity and inclusion really talks about. Now, to start this session, I have the first question here, which goes thus. What does diversity and inclusion have to do with children storytelling? What does diversity and inclusion have to do with children storytelling? I want Dele to start.
Thank you very much, Ayo. Super excited. Ayo is working with us at Kunda Kids as a book we're putting out together. So super, super excited about that. And for me, diversity and inclusion is it's everything, because we live in London, and there's a statistic I like to put out there all the time. Only 2% of recently published children's books in the UK has a lead Black character. Now, the implication of this is that the literature children are reading as they're growing up, because they don't understand China is 10,000 miles away. They don't understand South Africa is, this distance away. They don't understand geography at that age. They see the world from the books that they read. And when these books present this picture that the world is all about animals and, non-Black characters as protagonists in the books, kids grow up with that mindset that this is how the world is meant to be. And unfortunately, these are the things that leads to ignorance, prejudice, and this is what leads to racism in the future. And so that's why we at Kunda Kids, we've really set out to increase the number of titles when it comes to books that have Black lead characters, because there's such a big deficiency in the industry at the moment. And, that's why diversity is important, because kids need to see a better representation of the world. Kids need to get to understand, what it is to grow up in, to start having exposure to different societies. So they know that the whole world is not just England, or the whole world is not just the United States. They need to grow up understanding people come from different places. And that's why it's really important for us to keep on putting out really good content, so that the books we put out will be a tool to take kids into that world where they get to see other characters, see proper representation. So I know there are a lot of questions to talk about, but I'll try not, I won't talk too much, because I know the amazing panelists have so many things to say too. So I'll just stop there right now.
I can see that Christine is beaming with a smile. She has something to say. So over to you, Christine.
Well, I'm smiling because, I'm in great company, and thank you for this question. When it comes to storytelling, I can think back to when I was about 14 and I turned on the TV and there was a cartoon playing and the characters were speaking in Shona. This had never happened. I'd never seen it. They were playing outside the same way I played outside, climbing trees in their playtime and eating mangoes. I was just blown away. I just sat down and I froze watching this and it was gone. And then I turned on TV the next day, it did not come back. And the next day and the next day. And I went back to school. I was in boarding school at the time. And I told people I saw this cartoon and nobody believed me because nobody saw it, which was so unfortunate. And finally, one other person actually did see this episode and shared the same excitement and joy. And it was just like this validation that kids that speak like me can have their stories told, and it can just be normal. We don't only have to see the Smurfs and Barber and Captain Planet. It can be kids like me. But unfortunately, that was like a fleeting moment, right? And that's etched in my memory. And it reminds me that we need stories that show kids in their normal environment that they're valid. They can be joyous, they can be adventurous, they can be brave, they can be bold, they can be vulnerable. And so the diversity in children's literature, it crosses so many sections and experiences of childhood and of life. I'm going to end there to give a chance for everybody else to speak. Thank you.
That's so fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I know that Joanna is not African, so can you talk along that line? Let's see what that childhood was like and what diversity and inclusion, what it means to you, why we should talk about it in children's storytelling.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. And at World Kidlit, we were a bunch of translators who also saw very much what Delhi was seeing in the British and American publishing markets. Very, very low percentage of characters that were Black or from different parts of the world. And the idea was to try to make it easier for people to find books in translation, and sort of in more recent years, books published in English outside the UK and the US, which is how I met IU then. And so for us, we also expand on diversity as in diverse voices coming from outside the UK, outside the US, and that will also be diverse perspectives on history, which will be very different. Also the issue of language and how English is used differently, and even the fact that many parts of the world are multilingual, which is really exciting as well. So that's how we're building on diversity and inclusion at the World Kidlit.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Ugo, what do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to agree with much of what everyone has said. I think the only thing I'd like to add to that is that for many children, storytelling is the first way that they view the world, and they learn about other places, and they learn how to interact with the world around them. So it's important that storytelling, that when they hear stories or when they read books, that they see themselves in these books that they read. It helps with, like Christine said, it helps children to feel more accepted and to develop positive self-image. There's nothing as wonderful as opening up a book like Sue, like Aya said, and reading about a child who is the same skin color as I am. So for me, growing up, I read a lot of Enid Blyton. I did not encounter books with Black characters, not to talk of protagonists, until well into my teenager. The first time I read a book by Ned Okorafor, I cried. I could not believe that it was possible to have a full, fantastical, magical adventure book with a Black protagonist. It was, I couldn't believe it. In fact, and then not just a Black protagonist, but written by a Nigerian. So it's so important that children are able to see themselves in books. It's particularly important in storytelling and in books, because this is the first way that they learn to see the world. And if they're able to see themselves in the beginning, it helps them develop positive self-image.
That's very fantastic. I just want to chip in something, which is, I remember growing up, if there was a story that was shared to me that was more like a native story that has this plot and characters that connect with us, this kind of folk stories usually use animal characters to drive home the narrative. So it became kind of a normal thing to me as a child. Okay, once I'm reading something native, it has to do with the tortoise or some animal and all that. And it took a while to grow up and grow out of that shell to understand that we can actually have Black characters participating in a story that I, as a child, can actually connect with. So it's very relevant. It's very important. And as we're discussing this, we're discussing because of the young minds that are listening to us at this moment, who might be thinking of, okay, I want to write a story and I want my character to be Bill or Jill because I want to appeal to a Western audience. We are saying here that whether the name of your character is Ayo or the name of your character is Ugo, be sure that that character is valid, the story is valid, and the world is yearning to actually read what you have to tell. So in line with that question, I want everybody to speak from a personal perspective now. Like, what does diversity in literature mean to you as a person and to your craft? What does it mean to you personally? Like, how are you addressing this? How do you see it? What do you think about it generally? How has it even influenced your craft as a person? So I want Ugo to start.
So for me, I would say that. So for me, I think I'd say that the one way it has influenced my craft is that I find myself wanting to write more and more stories about Nigerian children. So I want to write about the things that happen. In fact, I find that I want to write more about the things that happened to me when I was growing up in the 80s, because I want other Nigerian children that are growing up today to know what life was like a few years ago. And so I find that I want to write books that would tell children about, especially children that are not in Nigeria, about Nigeria, kids that are in the diaspora. I want them to open up books, especially books published outside the shore of Nigeria, to see books that have them or life in Nigeria in it. So I'm really excited about that. So another thing I want to do is, growing up, one of the things I really liked reading about was Greek mythology. Medieval times, I read a lot about Otto and the Knights of the Round Table, Zeus, and everyone else's history but my history. So there weren't any books on Nigerian history. No books on, definitely no storybooks on say Nigerian mythology. In fact, I only just started learning about the Orisha and then Igbo gods last year. And so I find that now I want to do a lot of writing along those lines, so that little Nigerian children, especially, I mean, children all over the world would read about them, but Nigerian children especially, to know a lot more about us and where they are from, and see themselves also in books. So I find that I want to, in my writing, write a lot about myself and my life, for people who are like me to be able to see themselves in books, and then for people who aren't like me to learn what life is like for people who are like me.
Let me chip in something based on what you just said. I remember that I read Suwe because you tweeted about it. You love the book, you tweeted about it. I'm not sure whether I dropped the comment or I retweeted, but I know that I saw it. I'm like, okay, if Ugo is so passionate about this story, what about it? I want to read it, Like, I don't like that kind of pop culture. I don't want pop culture to influence what I'll read. Like, okay, it's Lupita, oh, she's an Oscar winner. That's fine. But I don't want that to influence it. So the moment you sort of endorsed it, like, okay, this is actually really cool. Like, okay, I need to actually read it. And I think that that's also is something that we writers and publishers need to do for one another. Like, you are reading the material and you really think it's actually nice, don't hesitate to talk about it, because it would actually encourage someone else to do so. So over to Dele, what do you think about how has diversity in literature, how has it influenced your craft? What does it even mean to you from childhood to this moment?
Well, my stories are quite different because I didn't grow up reading a lot of books, unfortunately. I was a kid that would want to play football every day, play games, kick everything. And growing up, whenever there's a party, like everybody would buy me toy guns or football, water. I was that little boy, right? And it was deep into my teenage years. Even as a student, I never used to read for exams. I just show up, I pass, and then. But it was until like late teenagers, especially when I was getting into the university, that was when I started reading. And I started reading novels at that time in my life. And that was when I started understanding. And I'll say that I kind of transformed as a person, from this really unserious person to this serious person. Now, how does that relate to the question that I'm answering? It relates because one of the things that we're trying to tackle is the poor, well, we say there's a poor reading culture. And I believe some of these things are that way because, for instance, one of the messages that we try to put out, in what we do is we tell parents, uncles and aunties, like, instead of buying that toy when it's birthday time, buy a book. Like, we try to promote the reading culture, and we're launching our new books in Lagos next week. We're planning a whole campaign around that, not necessarily to promote our books, but our campaign is going to be about promoting the reading culture in Nigeria, because it starts from there. It starts from we inspiring children. So that's one of the things that I believe we absolutely need to do in terms of inspiring everyone. Let's get the right content going to our kids, because I didn't. It was like I wasn't given that option growing up. I was always the kid that everybody buys. Oh yeah, if it's daily, give him a book. No, not sorry, give him a football. It's gonna be fine. And I was so fine with it. But I kind of imagine if I started reading, as a little boy, I think it would have really transformed a lot more about me. I'm glad for where I am today and what I'm doing. But I didn't start reading till later. So we're really trying to tackle that. And one of the things that also really inspires me and keeps me going is I have a 2-year-old, and I want him to grow up in a world that there's acceptance, in a world where we all accept ourselves, in a world where all kids see themselves as equal, and it starts with children's books. So these are the things that do inspire us in the in our own craft.
I guess you had a fun-filled childhood, and I envy you because growing up for me, there were just books. I mean, lots of books.
Yeah,
There
I
are
did.
lots of books.
I did. Some of my uncles and aunties still look at me that we can't believe you're a serious person.
Because for me, my dad had books. He brought me exercise books whereby when I read a story, he would ask me to summarize what I read, and he would have to mark my essay. So it's just like a world whereby you are reading, you're educating your mind, you're always educating your mind. And I later grew up and realized, okay, my dad couldn't really afford to buy me lots of toys. So he felt, okay, let me give him books. Before he's done reading this and he's done reading next, you forget about the toys. But regardless, I think it's fun. Let the kids have the toys and let them also have the books. Both together can actually work, So I think that's cool. Christine, what do you think? Diversity and how it has helped your craft?
So diversity definitely influences my craft and my ideas. And much like Dele, I really was not a reader as a young person. And I think a big part of that was because I struggled to find stories that would really grab me, stories that would that has something familiar that can hold me long enough to continue reading. I was also a slow reader, so I had that struggle. In addition to the struggle finding stories that can, pull me in, I did not have books gifted to me often. My grandfather had an entire Shakespeare library. My mother still talks about it and how much she read all of that. And I could not get into it. It was in my bedroom, and I could not really get into the stories. But that was great for them and not great for me. So part of that is helping children find the stories that speak to them, that also then encourage them to continue reading and wanting them to discover more stories. But like Ugo was saying earlier, I want to write more stories that are pulling directly from my childhood in Zimbabwe, because there were just so many experiences there. There's so much drama, so many funny things, and there were sad moments too. But that's life, right? It needs to be a wholesome experience when people are reading, and we want to give that to them. We want to give them the fantasy, we want to give them the humor and the drama and the inspirational stories. We want all of that. So that really does stay in the back of my mind literally every day. When I wake up, I'm just rethinking what ideas I have and what I can do to get closer to accomplishing that goal.
That's fantastic. If you're just joining the room, this is the children's room. We're talking about diversity and inclusion, how it influences children's storytelling. If you have any question, just drop it in the chat so that once I see it, the moderator will let me know and we can ask the panelists the question, because I'm hoping like by the end of this session, we might not really have much time to be asking questions. So once you have any question now, it's popping in your mind right now, just drop it in the chat and I'll just pass it across to the panelists. So Joanna, I know that there must have been a story, an experience before you deciding to say, okay, I want to translate stories, I want to translate books, I want to work with Word Kidly, let's kind of build a bridge and all that kind of stuff. So what's the story like? What does diversity, what does it mean to you? How has it helped your craft?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at this stage, running for World Kidlit is a chance to tell other people about the books that I think are exciting. And then the next stage is to hopefully build connections with the publishers who will then publish them. So as a translator, we can be really excited about various different books, but it's up to persuading publishers. And that's why I'm very excited to see so many new independent presses popping up across different African countries, because it's exciting to see writers themselves just start, because if you wait for somebody to ask you to tell your story, it might not happen. So as a translator, all I can do is talk about books. And as an auntie who loves reading books, my poor nephew is going to get so many books as a present. He can't read yet. He can barely, hold the books. So that's kind of what will be influencing me as well. The books that I want to tell other people about will also go as presents.
Fantastic. And I want you to know that Nigerians and Africans are really trying to take their future into their hands at the moment. New publishers are springing up every day, like Kunda Kids, like Global Kids Little House, and many of them, like, for us to break into that Western market where you have that large market, so to speak, is pretty difficult. Why? Because the kind of stories we tell does not often connect with these Western editors, and that is just the truth. So you're trying to push into this market, they're not getting it, they're not connecting with the story. So it gets to a point where you just like, okay, we can actually take our futures into our hands. So if you see Kunda Kids talking about taking the books to the streets, reviving the reading culture, Global Kids House talking about having a magazine for children, releasing new books, it's not something that is easy, but we feel like it's the point that if we don't do that, what will become of our children and the next generation? There was a time where Nigeria had this kind of luck in the mid-50s where there was Animal Book Publishing, and they helped to publish a lot of African writers at the time. They even created a series. But after that season passed, there was a dearth in publishing, in putting out good books, in putting out quality books. But I can tell you that as of today, new publishers are springing. They are putting up their funds, their resources, their marketing skills to ensure that the books are out there so that our voices can be heard. And I think that's important too. Christy said something about our childhood reading, not being able to dig into Shakespeare's works because at the time it would be kind of too much for her to read. And because of that, that's why books have different kind of genres for kids to read. If you have a kid today that is saying that I don't like reading, I'm telling you that you are not giving that kid the right kind of book to read. If the kid still wants to read picture books, images, simple sentences, form-filled content, let them have that. So don't shove difficult text or difficult materials into their brain so that it won't look like it's everything doesn't come off as educational. It's time to learn. It's time to learn. It should be fun. And I think that's something that we children writers and publishers often work on to ensure that the material is good enough for them to like it, to love it, to own the character, and to even tell others about it. On to my next question. I remember one of the books I read as a child was, I think, Drummer Boy by Cipriani Quincy. I'm not sure. And that book was about a boy that was blind, that was beating the drum or something like that. And because I read that story, anytime I see a child that is physically challenged, I sort of assume that the next thing to do is to just take pity, take pity on them and pity them, feel so sorry for them, and hope to get back well and all that. Now, but this is 21st century, and we're looking at what diversity and inclusion actually means to us. What does it actually mean to all of us? So in that line, I'm asking that question, which is, why should we tell stories about children that are physically challenged? And how can we tell these stories properly? Why should we tell this kind of stories? Why should we have this kind of characters in our books? Then how can we actually pass this knowledge across in such a way that it is not condescending and it's not like a pity party story? So I want Dele to start on that.
Yeah, thank you. Quickly, what I'll say is, I think it's a job of we publishers, yes, but it's also largely the responsibility of parents and educators, like parents and teachers. And what we need to do is to make sure we create really good content that makes it very easy for parents to have these conversations with kids. Say for instance, you don't need to write a whole story about I don't know. I don't have any example off the top of my head, but it's just about introducing some of these characters in empowering ways, also in subtle ways that when parents are reading these books to the kids, then they can easily pick up some of those points. Like, okay, you can see this character here. What do you think is going on with their skin? And you let your child know it's actually okay for people to there are people like this, because it's I'll say it's really important for kids to learn this growing up. And another reason why it's really important is, one thing that kids need to learn growing up is empathy.
True.
And this is usually books is like I said, it's the way, to open a kid's mind to the whole world. And with the right resources, with us putting this in books the right way, it helps kids also build empathy and see that this person with this disability, it's is also a human being, and we need to treat this person also with respect, just the same way we want to be respected. So it takes a lot of work, a lot of skill, but it's yeah. I'll stop there. That's kind of all I have to say about that for now.
Great. Ugo, what do you think?
So why should we tell stories about physically challenged characters?
Yeah.
I think it's important to foster acceptance, to make sure that, well, first of all, I think it's important for all children to see themselves in books. And I think it's important because, the world is, for want of a better word, diverse in nature, right? And so everyone needs to be represented in books for us to have that feeling of acceptance, especially children. And so I would say it's particularly important for children like that to see, for physically challenged children to see themselves in books. One, because I mentioned earlier, developing positive self-image. And then also because it helps them feel accepted in the society that they belong in. It's also particularly important for children who aren't physically challenged to have an idea of what life is like for children who are physically challenged. So I know that there's this article, I can't remember right now who the author is, but it's called Windows, Mirrors, and Sliding Glass Doors, or Mirrors, Windows, and Sliding Glass Doors. I'm going to find it after talking now and put it down in the chat. But it's basically, the author basically speaks about why it's important to provide mirrors in literature for children so that all children can see themselves in books, then to provide windows in literature for children so that other children will have an idea of what life is like for people who aren't like them. And then the sliding glass doors are also basically like the windows. So basically literature we creators should make books that provide opportunities for children to see themselves in books and for other people to see what life is like for people who aren't like them. So it's important for us to create stories about physically challenged children, for the children themselves and for other children to understand what their lives are like. And then for the how these books should be created, I think that, there's a whole movement in the world now about people writing only about what they know. I would say in that situation, if someone wants to write outside their worldview or outside their life, I think it's particularly important that a person actually sits down and learns what it's like or what life is like for a person who is physically challenged, so that the writing doesn't come out, like you said earlier, Ayo, as condescending or not enough, or doesn't even come out in such a way that it becomes indirectly hurtful to the physically challenged. So I do think it's possible for people who aren't physically challenged to write about physically challenged characters, but it's important that they do a lot of learning first before they do it. And then the writing can be in any form. It can be, the characters can be the protagonists, they can be antagonists, as long as they also play integral parts in the books. They're not just passing by because we want to, make up a number and make the book look diverse. I don't know if I'm explaining what I mean well, but it's important they also play integral roles, because everywhere they are in the world, they also play integral roles in their lives and in the lives of others. So I think, yes, it's important. And then writing about physically challenged people, one should do a lot of studying first if one isn't physically challenged, to ensure that the right message is passed across and that the book isn't indirectly hurtful to the person whose life we're trying to, for want of a better word, share.
Great. Christine, while you were growing up, did you read children's books that are those that were physically challenging them? If you did, how did it speak to you? How did you make you see them? And also, as a person growing up now, being a publisher, how are you trying to tackle this? How are you trying to make a balance in this kind of inclusion between those that are physically challenged and those that are not?
Thank you for that question, Ayo. So when it comes to stories that represent groups of people that I would just say are physically different, and I have a hard time with the word disabled, so I'm just going to say physically different. I didn't really see a lot of those stories. Again, I didn't read as much, so I kind of had that in the way. But like Della said, we need to allow our children to build empathy. And I was fortunate that I was that kind of kid that was very empathetic to so many kinds of different people. I don't know if I can say that was something that came naturally or something that my grandmother nurtured in me. But Ugo was dropped my favorite line, which is windows, mirrors, and sliding doors. Okay. Our stories really need to enable us to slide in and out of our world into other worlds, right? Just the other day, I was walking with my daughter, and she's more aware of certain things, right? So she noticed that there's Braille language almost like everywhere. So she said, "Why is there Braille language everywhere, Mommy?" And I was like, "Well, because if you weren't able to see, and if you were blind, what language do you use?" And she said Braille, because she knows that. And I said, "You're going around everywhere, and English is there for you to know. The signs are there in English for you to know where you are and what it is. So if you are blind, you would need Braille." And she agreed that there was nothing else to explain, right? So, those little moments, it doesn't require an extensive lecture for our children to be able to build empathy, right? It's through stories, it's through just moments in everyday life. It's through a play date with a child that's physically different and saying, "Hey, you know that Stephanie cannot see. So when you guys play, just make sure she doesn't miss a step. And then you guys can continue playing, having playtime, because you can still have playtime. She's still human like you." And these are the things that should be in our stories, so that our kids can appreciate their humanity and not view them as a burden, because they are not. One of the greatest names in Zimbabwean history, his name is Jairus Jiri, and he had physical challenges, but he grew to actually create a foundation called the Jairus Jerry Foundation and a center to help people across the country that were physically challenged. And it's just such an impressive accomplishment, because he did so much for the disabled with very little. And so that's, these are the examples we want our kids to be able to see. They are not sidelines. Disabled groups of people are not in the sidelines. They are part of the main story. They are the main story.
That's fantastic. I'm really enjoying this session. I'm learning a lot from everyone, and I hope that everyone on the panel joining us in the room are also jotting down a thing or two. Johanna, based on the work you're doing in line of translation, have you had to translate a book or books that have to do with kids that are physically challenged? If yes, if no, if you have to do such a thing, how do you coordinate the content in such a way that it's not condescending to the reader? Because I know that people that are physically challenged, like from the tribe where I come from now, if you are deaf, I'll call you deaf. And the person won't take huge offense because that's who they are. Or probably you can just call them by their names. I know that maybe in some cultures, you can't actually do that. You get, it might come off as offensive and stuff like that. So based on the nature of what you're doing, how have you been managing this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it takes me back to actually how I first got connected with World Kidlit. Because I had been working on a book by a Rwandan author, Joseph Ndwanyi, who lives in Belgium, in Brussels. And so it's not physically challenged, but it's the character has sickle cell disease, and they live in Brussels, and it's a young boy, and he needs to go to hospital a lot. But at the same time, there's a beautiful part of the story where he gets his dream to be taken to Rwanda for the first time to meet his grandfather, and he discovers he has these musical talents. And it was just wonderful to talk to Joseph about the book, and it doesn't end entirely happy. And I had also been looking to see if there were similar stories in English, and not long after, I think it was Julie Dada published Boom Boom, which is for slightly older children. Which I'm sure I discovered via social media via IU. And I just thought this is very important for the empathy. It's important for the children and the families, because the only things I found in English have been written literally by nurses. This is what happens when you go to hospital, which is very scientific. But it was just so moving to see a little story where there was the whole family, the whole life. The child discovered he could play a wonderful musical instrument, and just what it's like to be in hospital. So it was very, very moving, and sort of I lent it to a few other children who know nothing about sickle cell, and they were able to get involved in the whole story. We're still hoping to find someone to publish it in English, so if anybody has any ideas. And so that one it didn't have the challenges of finding the right words in English that you have when it comes to more physical challenges. And I think you need to just remember who the audience is. And thankfully, language is evolving all the time. And there are more groups of people who can speak out and say, hello, this is who we are. We'd like you to talk about us this way. So it does require reading what people who have these challenges themselves write, either if it's an official document or their own stories. So it does involve a lot of research, and ideally also reaching out to someone just to check that if you write something in English, it's expressed in a way that is respectful for the people, because there are certainly some languages where you can be more direct, and you just say things in a way which is not as respectful, let's say, in English. And in the way I think English is evolving perhaps much faster than in some other languages, it's a very interesting debate, and thankfully things keep changing, so it requires a lot of talking to people. Yeah.
That's really, really deep, and I really appreciate what you're doing. The couple of Nigerian linguistics that are also trying to go into that field of translation. I think maybe the challenges we might be experiencing is like it's not really like a lucrative kind of job. It's not something that you get a fund to do. So very few of Oh, Dami, you're raising up your hand. Do you want to say something?
Yes, sir. We have about 8 minutes to go.
We have 8 minutes to go. Wow. That's interesting. And Ugo, thank you for putting in the title of that book, Boom Boom by Junie Dada. Jude is my friend, is my brother. He's just fantastic. And he actually took his time to write that book because he lost a friend to sickle cell. And he just felt like, okay, how can we educate children about things like this? How can we open their minds? And I think during the Kuramo Fest, I think I was on the panel with, I think I interviewed him or something like that. So we got to talk more about that and all that. Now, because we run out of time, I quickly just want to add that we're all aware that when we're talking about diversity in literature, diversity cuts across culture, age, gender, race, and stuff like that. But there's a particular one that I discovered that it's not often discussed in African literature, African children's literature, which is about sexual orientation. It's pretty more or less impossible for you to see a book written by a children's author today that focuses on children's sexual orientation for children to understand. So I want to know, why is it that we are not writing about this? Should we even write about it? I want your open-hearted opinion on this. Why do you think that authors of this on this continent, on this part of the world, don't want to talk about it? Is it like you are trying to be sanctimonious, or is it, what exactly is it? Why are we not writing about it? And should we even write about it? Because somebody will say they're kids. Why should we be talking about that now? So I want Christine to start on that.
Yeah, so this is a topic that is definitely difficult, and it's a challenge. And it's a challenge really across the globe, but particularly in African countries, because you can be stoned to death for being gay or being lesbian, or you can be shunned from society. And oftentimes you just don't want to come out because you don't know what reactions you're going to experience. I personally, growing up in Zimbabwe, did not even know the word gay in my native language, did not hear it for many, many years. But just the fact that I did not know this word for that long shows you how our society did not, include that group of people, did not want to even have a conversation about that group of people, right? And then when you throw in religion, whether we're talking about Christianity or Islam, there will always be this conundrum of, well, it is not biblical, right? Or it is not part of our belief system in the Islam world. And so therefore, this is wrong. We need to fix you. These people have to be fixed. Can you write children's stories? Yes, you can, but I don't know where you're going to publish them. We have not evolved to be at that point, because let's remember all the changes that have happened in history, whether it was regarding human rights, of children's rights, there had to be a tipping point, right? An event that forced the society and people to come together and say, you know what? This is insanity. You do not need to condemn this. It is not preventing life from going forward. But we haven't reached that point. So the reality is we're talking about it right now, and that's a good thing. But then then more conversations have to happen. And individuals in different places have to look inside themselves, because before we have a congregation of people come together, it's an individual internal discussion to say, why does this bother me? And if it does bother me, on what grounds do I stand to defend or to support, to oppose, or whatever it is? And then you can have 2, 3, 4, 5, 100 people, and eventually you have an actual movement. So I think we can accept that this is where we are and that progress can be made, but we have to recognize the limitations that do exist, because nobody wants to be dehumanized. I mean, we're talking about humanizing every group of people, and this is just a part of that process. Thank you.
Fantastic. I have less than 3 minutes to go, so I want Ugo to lend our voice into that in a minute.
Okay, I'll agree with Christine and say that the biggest issue is religion, irrespective of the type of religion, and a lot of times parents aren't even willing to discuss the topic of sex itself before we even get to the situation of sexual orientation. And so it gets even more, that makes it even more difficult. So yes, first of all, who is going to publish the book? And then when it's published, who is going to buy it? Because parents buy the books for the children. And so all these make it really difficult for writers to freely discuss issues of sexual orientation. Then there is also the fact that in Nigeria, besides religion, we have laws that prohibit homosexuality. And so you don't even want to be on the wrong side of the law as well. And so these are all the factors that make it difficult for writers to write about sexual orientation. But I think it will eventually happen, and that right now we're just basically living in denial and postponing the inevitable, and that we'll get there eventually.
Dele, in 1 minute, why do you think it's important? Should we touch children about stuff like this at this stage?
So I think it's important for one thing I say is it's important for you not to shield information from children, because they'll find out. So you rather control how they, get the information versus they finding out on their own. Because when they do, you never know how it's gonna go. However, I also believe content needs to be age appropriate, and that's also something that I've seen some publishers do well, and others have gotten it completely wrong. If you look at what we're doing at Kunda Kids, for instance, we're talking about African history. That's our general theme, but all the research we did pointed out, we can't actually start telling kids the history of Shaka Zulu, was always fighting battles and all. It doesn't help their development, over 3-4-year-old. And similarly, so talking about sexual orientation, my own approach is this. I think we need to first get to a point where we as parents and publishers are confident to start introducing the topic of sexuality and sex in gender, everything in children's books. And then from there we evolve into, okay, now we can talk about other things around sexuality, sexual orientation. But right now we're still struggling to even teach kids about sex, and that's so I think we need to start with that first, and then we evolve into the more difficult areas that our religion frowns against so much.
Fantastic. Johanna, what do you think? In a minute, what can you say to that?
Yeah, I can be very brief. This is an issue that's sensitive elsewhere in the world. We're seeing new laws in Europe, in Hungary, for example, where certain books have recently been banned. So it's a sensitive problem everywhere. Yeah.
Wow. I wish time could just be held for like another 1 hour for us to continue this. But I think we've really been able to say a thing or two that I think would create a kind of ripple effect to help emerging writers, young writers to tell stories about African children properly. Ditto for those that are working on translations in different languages in Africa. I think from the things we've said, it would also help them. And I think with the kind of books we're pushing out now, we're able to change the narrative. And I thank everyone on the panel for joining, and for everyone in the room, thank you for joining us. If you'd like to reach out to any one of us, I can tell you that everyone here, they are popular, unlike me. You know, that child asked me, like, are you popular? So unlike me, Christine Mapondera, just Google up her name, you get her contact, you can reach out on Instagram, Twitter. Same thing for Ugo Anidi, Dele Olafuye, and Louisa Olafuye, then Joanna McCalmont. Everybody, you can reach out to us, send us a DM, reach out to us, follow us, and we can keep the conversation going on there. So thank you, TVO Tribe, for having us, and we look forward to doing this again next year. So over to you, Dami. We're saying bye from here.
Thank you so much. It was such an insightful session. Thank you very much, Ayo. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Ugo. Thank you, Mr. Dele. So before we leave, I'll just like to say a few words about TVO Tribe. At TVO Tribe, we're a literary community that focuses on preserving the African narrative. We try to make sure that we keep creatives that are interested in telling the African stories. We help them find their voice. We help them to be able to speak. We help them to be able to write stories that will connect with us. We help them to be able to find their own identity in the midst of the whole noise and rancor. So we hope that next year you will do this with us again, and it will be much more enlightening than this. I'll be dropping a link in the chat box in case you want to join the tribe. We would love to have you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining. It was wonderful having you.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm saying bye from here. And you can see this video on YouTube. So go check out the link on YouTube.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.